Hello and welcome to another episode of DEIB Outdoors. I'm your host, Lisa Countler Williams, and today we have a special guest joining us, Craig DiMartino, Climbing Manager of Adaptive Adventures. Adaptive Adventures is a nonprofit organization providing progressive outdoor opportunities to improve the quality of life for children, adults, and veterans with physical disabilities. And Craig, well, he's a champion climber. He is the first amputee to climb El Capitan in under a day. And he's also a two-time National Adaptive Climbing Champion and a two-time bronze medal winner in Adaptive Worlds. Wow. And welcome to the podcast, Craig.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Love talking about this kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm excited.
Perfect. Well, again, you are coming with your Adaptive Adventures hat on. Can you tell me how the organization began?
Yeah, about 25 years ago, this is actually their 25th year. 2024 will be their 25th year in existence. So they've been around for a while. And back in that time, two guys, one was an amputee and one was in a wheelchair, and they're both skiers. Living in the mountains, and they wanted to take some of their buddies skiing who had similar disabilities. And at that time, there were no organizations that they knew or worked with that were doing it. So they started to kind of take their friends into the mountains, realized that there was like a real need for it, that these people wanted to still go do these things, but because of whatever their disability was, they kind of didn't have access. And these two guys just decided, hey, you know what, let's make something happen. And so they started Adaptive Adventures as a ski program. And then they kind of built that out to the one founder was from Chicago originally. So his family kind of had a pretty big, strong presence in Chicago. So he wanted to have programs there as well. So they built kind of a ski program there that kind of broke into biking, paddling, water skiing, and then eventually climbing, and just these outdoor sports that typically aren't like the things that when you hear disability, you think, oh, this person's going to be doing that. These guys were more like, oh, anyone can do this. We just have to figure out how to do it. So, and they've been going strong ever since.
Oh, amazing. And then at what point in the journey of this organization did you come in, and how did it come to be that you had heard of them and decided to join their mission?
Yeah, I've been with them about 14 years now, 12 years. And I had been working in adaptive climbing. Obviously, I got hurt climbing, came back to climbing, was kind of doing my own thing. And then I met a friend who he actually had his own nonprofit, and I did some climbing stuff with him. And I happened to meet one of the program managers, and I also met Chelsea Elder, who is the executive director. And Chelsea and I just clicked right away. She's one of those people that you meet her and you love her passion. You love her. She has such a humble heart, and she's just a lovely human being. And she said, yeah, it'd be cool. Like if we could do something together, that would be cool. And I'm going to have this one guy reach out to you with a question. And his name was Dave. And Dave was kind of like the office manager, general manager kind of a thing. And he said, we have a small climbing program. He's like, we would like to grow that climbing program. Could you help us write the job description? And I said, yeah. So I kind of sat down, kind of banged out like a pretty quick job description. But as I was typing the job description, I basically wrote a job that I would like. I thought, cool. If somebody's going to get hired, this is what I know what to say to get them hired. And so I sent it back to Dave, and he kind of asked me what I thought of it. And I said, I think it's a great job. It's like, it's a kind of job that I would actually apply for. And he was like, oh my God, I was hoping you were going to say that. He's like, I wanted you to write that so that then you said I would do that. So that's actually how I got hired. And that was, like I said, I think that was like 12 or I can't remember what year I started, 12 or 13 years ago.
Amazing.
And the program was small, and we just kind of we've been growing it every year since. And it's been just wonderful to be a part of.
Oh, incredible. Yeah. So as you mentioned, there was a start in Colorado, and then there was the co-founder who had his posse in Chicagoland, but it's since grown to, did I read over 30 states in the US, or
Yeah.
How expansive is it at this point?
So we have two offices. We have the Denver office, which has always been here. And then we have that Chicago office, which has always been there. But then what we do is, and this is kind of where Adaptive is very unique, we set up mobile satellites. So like for the climbing program, what I do is I go to different areas around the country. We work with the VA quite a bit. So we get an adaptive sport grant every year, and that allows us to then go to underserved or not served communities and set up programming. So I'll go into an area. I actually work with my wife. My wife is a contractor for us. And so she started working with us about 2 years ago. And she and I have both been climbers of really most of our lives. And Cindy was with me when I got hurt. She understands the trauma curve. She understands like how rehabilitation works because she was there firsthand. Yes. So what we do is we go into areas, kind of identify partners that are going to be there. For me, it's like working with climbing gyms and then the local VA, and then identifying like a lead volunteer who will go in. I'll train them. I'll train the staff. We'll get everything set up and running so that the VA sport grant can pay for any veterans coming into the program. So basically we cover all their fees, anything they need to get into the sport, we take care of. And then I step back, and then that they run the program, and then we kind of just dip back into the program as needed. So sometimes that's, once a year, sometimes that's 6 times a year. It just depends on kind of what that group needs from us and from me. Really. So we want to support them as much as they need, but we also want them to kind of run and do it on their own, but under the umbrella of Adaptive Adventures. That's why you see 30, I think it might even be 42 states. And Puerto Rico and Hawaii. So it's quite a spread that we hit.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. The need's obviously there. So It's great that you have the resources to be as in many places as possible for that.
Right.
There's so many rock climbing gyms and of course outdoor climbing areas. How do you choose the right ones for your activities and for your partnerships?
When Chelsea does the VA grants each year, she will identify underserved areas. And then we will say to the VA, this is where you guys don't have programs and we want to step in and do that. Or the VA will say, we'd really like to have a climbing program in this location, wherever that is. And then it's kind of my job to go and figure out, okay, what is the good climbing gym? So the climbing program, we start them in the climbing gym, and they'll usually do like 6 weeks in the climbing gym. I'll be there for the first 1 or 2 sessions with them so that everybody feels comfortable with whatever adaptations they need. And then they will kind of run from there. So when we want them to go outside eventually. So that piece, Cindy and I always have to be there for that. So then we'll go back. So say they do a 6-week kind of progression. We'll go back after that. They'll take a short break and then we'll step back in and do an outdoor climbing day with them. So that way there's like this kind of carrot, like, here's the basics of climbing. Here's how you get a little bit better. And then we're going to go outside because in all honesty, that's kind of where we see like lots of healing happen. That's where things really get the person you get that whole health angle from that point, because now you're in this setting, even if they don't climb, like we have veterans and civilians who come with us, and I tell them, even if you don't climb, that's fine, but like just sit with us, be present with us, put your phone down, listen to the things around you that, we're usually in these gorgeous areas. And we can build those. Climbing is pretty accessible in the lower 48. So Cindy and I, being climbers as long as we are, we know the areas in the country. So it's kind of easy to be able to say, okay, they want us in, say, St. Louis. Well, okay, we can go there. And then there's a climbing area here that we can kind of branch out to. So we're able to kind of put it all together just because of our experience. And that just makes things pretty seamless and easy to work.
That totally makes sense. And I felt like we were telepathically linked because you led perfectly into my next question, which I'm like, did you see my questions? And that dealt with mental health. So you mentioned trauma earlier, and I know that mental health is one of the 4 focuses of Adaptive Adventures. And you explained the kind of healing, the whole healing that happens outdoors. Can you talk a bit about that? And if you could also address the veterans, the way that it would tie in with veterans and other people who come back after an injury and are trying adaptive sports for the first time.
Yeah, what we do, climbing is a really great sport in that it forces you to focus. And we talk a lot about the flow state, and the flow state is when you're in this level of higher consciousness as you're doing this activity, you're not thinking of anything else. So there's very few things in life that allow you to slip into the flow state. And You see it in like certain sports like climbing, big wave, skiing, things with
Mm.
high consequence. If you're not paying attention, the when they go sideways, they go pretty catastrophic. So you want to be focused on what you're doing. And because it requires that focus, we've seen like with PTSD and traumatic brain injuries, the symptoms and the things that cause them go down when they're climbing, because
Mm.
when they're climbing, they're not thinking about those other things. They're focused on, I talk a lot about the 3 feet in front of you. That's the
Mm.
only place when you're climbing that you can actually affect change. So when you're looking at a climb or a route or whatever it is, you can't look at the whole thing. You have to just look at it in chunks. And your PTSD, your traumatic brain injury, your trauma, those are the same thing. If you look at the whole, it will just fry your mind, right? And me coming from my background and my injuries were huge. I had to amputate my leg. I have a fused back and neck. I have chronic pain. I have chronic nerve disorders. Those things taken on the surface will be just debilitating. But if
Mm.
you break them down into these manageable 3-foot section chunks, you can actually do quite a bit with that. And so we do
Mhm.
that as when we're climbing, that thing that you did climbing, you can do that in your real life. So your
Mhm.
regular life can be broken down into those chunks as well. And when you're
Mhm.
outside, it's really a lot easier to kind of shut that other stuff out. In the climbing gym, there's music, the lights are bright, there's a lot of people. And so
Mhm.
when we have veterans who have like pretty hard PTSD, that can be overwhelming. And sometimes just coming to the gym is a win. Like they don't
Mm.
even have to climb. They're just being in that scene is a good thing. When we
Yes.
get them outside, the silence, the simplicity, the beauty, the colors, everything, the tactile nature of nature is
Mm.
incredible. And
Mm.
so you see them kind of tamp down those things. Now, sure, when they get back in the van and go back to the VA or wherever their home is, those things are going to come back. Obviously, it's not like a mirror pure, but over time and repetition, you start to realize, oh, I can use some of those things that we were talking about and use those in my everyday. And so instead of getting so ratcheted up, maybe we can kind of keep stepping down, and over time, those things will get better.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I'm thinking of those takeaways for those who got healing during that discrete period of time. And then the other folks who heard you say you don't have to climb, just be outside,
Right.
sitting down, but watching the people in front of them just focus on what's ahead, like the 3 feet that you mentioned, and to take those lessons as well. So you don't even have to be climbing, but just getting all the benefits of nature, the vitamin D and all of that.
Exactly.
Perfect. So what are some of the climbs? I'm guessing you're already prepared a few for 2024. What are
Yes.
some of the climbs that you're looking forward to offering?
Cindy and I just came back about a day ago from Hawaii. And so we started a program on Oahu, and that program will now they'll start on January 10th, and that program will then build. So that's going to be one of those ones where we'll let them build for 6 weeks. They'll take a short break, and then we'll go back, and we scouted out outdoor locations while we were there. We'll take the veterans outside. It's starting as a veteran only group. A big thing we like to do is if we have a veteran only group, we also have community nights where we just invite
Mm.
anybody with a disability, physical disability, to come in, and we teach them how to climb and how to work with their disability. We love the veterans to plug into that. So we don't want them to feel like they can only go with veterans, because again, because of this wonderful adaptive sport grant Adaptive gets, we're able to subsidize all that. So it
Mm.
doesn't cost them anything. So if you're a community member, the gyms we all work with give discounted rates for that. So if just an able-bodied person wants to come in, like myself, or not an able-bodied, a disabled person wants to come in and just climb, they give them a discounted rate, includes their shoes, their harness, all the stuff they need to climb. So
Mm.
they can come in at a much lower entry point. The veterans can come in under the grant, and then we want to build community. That's at the end of the day, that's the thing we want the most, because
Mhm.
that's when, like a lot of the times with trauma, the people isolate themselves. And as soon as they isolate themselves, then they start to kind of spiral down. It's very
Mm.
rare that someone isolates and gets better. You just kind of don't hear that. So if we can get them in community where they're like, oh, I can talk with, Craig or Lisa about their injuries.
Mhm.
Their injuries are similar to my injuries, and now I'm not alone anymore. And so
Mm.
again, even if they're not climbing, if they're just there hanging out talking, that is a huge win. So just realizing, I think a lot of times, that you're not alone is so powerful. And
Mhm.
like when I got hurt, one of the best things I had was a support network. I was married to Cindy, I had my kids, I had my extended family. Not everyone has support networks. And so we like to be kind of part of that net for them to kind of help prop them up a little bit so they don't feel like, oh God, nobody knows what I'm talking about. Nobody knows what I'm
Yes.
doing. Now you're with someone who actually does know what you're going through and understands. And so I think we feel really strongly about that the value of that is just kind of off the charts.
Okay, that makes sense. I know that community was another one of the values of
Yeah.
adaptive adventure. So I appreciate you explaining that more. Yeah, I also wanted to call out that by having it free, you're actually removing another barrier for people to
Yeah.
enjoy community. The only obstacle is getting enough gumption, I guess, to leave your house and go
Yeah.
do the
No, and
thing.
that's very true.
And
Well, we just had, I mean, a perfect example of that is we did a veteran group yesterday, and one of the veterans just they got to the venue where we were. The five of them came in, but one of them just seeing the gym, hearing the noises, that was too much, and that
Mhm.
person just decided not to do it. So you obviously have to be very careful how you do all these things because you don't want to make it harder. You're trying to help them, but you're right. Sometimes even that barrier of cost, which is huge. Climbing gyms are expensive. They are not cheap. And so if you realize, oh, I don't make enough money to go in there and spend, or they're on a fixed income, is usually what the
Mhm.
veterans we work with are, they're not going to be able to dump $40 to, go and climb for 2 hours. I mean, that's pretty expensive, right? So if we can kind of make sure there are no barriers and it's
Mhm.
just that gumption barrier, we can work with that one. The rest of them, those are real, and we don't want those to be the thing that hold them back. And most times they come in, and a lot of our folks come in, and even when they say, I don't want to climb, they'll watch for like an hour, and then they usually end up climbing because
Awesome.
it's fun, right? Climbing is a really fun thing to do. It's very
Yes.
community. It's very like just super supportive of each other. So I feel like they see the other people having fun and they're just like, well, heck, I feel like I should do that. And they do great.
That's awesome. I'm thinking of another way you personally that I read about removing barriers is working with a couple companies on equipment like Arc'teryx. I always see their name. Am I pronouncing the name
You did
correct?
it actually
Okay,
perfect.
Arc'teryx, cool. My daughter will be proud because she's always asking for the clothing. So Arc'teryx and Evolve. Can you talk about some of the partnerships you did to make their equipment more friendly for adaptive athletes?
Yeah, Evolve, it was really cool. Like so this is probably, oh gosh, 20 years ago now. We were making kind of our own climbing feet. And so
Hmm.
you would kind of cobble together whatever sort of worked for you. There was no like, let's all do this. It was just kind of like,
Mm.
do this, you do that. And so then this one company actually here in Boulder came up with a design, and the company's name is TRS, and
Mm.
TRS made this inner foot that then you could put a climbing shoe that Evolve made over. And you had this very universal foot that would fit any climber, right or left side, above
Mm.
the knee or below the knee amputee. It worked great. And so it kind of changed the game. The only problem was one of the feet would cost $1,200. And so that is quite a barrier, right? And so
Mhm.
I was working with TRS and I was working with Evolve, and I was driving with my athlete manager one day from Evolve, and he said, what's the biggest barrier for climbers right now? And I said cost, because people can't spend, you generally need 2 feet because you break them. And so you're talking, $1,200 times two plus the climbing shoe. It's getting up there pretty high.
Yeah.
And so he was like, okay, let me kind of think about that. And so he went back, and then we started kind of going back and forth with climbing holds are made of this the kind of this plasticky, it's a poured resin plastic, and
Mhm.
very strong and very durable. And he said, what if we used that? Like, what if we got that and poured that in the same mold? And so
Mm.
we started experimenting, and it ended up working really well. And that took the price point from 1,200 to 200.
Oh,
So
wow.
now, you've gotten down to where somebody, if they really want to take climbing more seriously, they can jump in and it's not as painful. And then
Mhm.
Arc'teryx, same thing with clothing and with different approaches to feet. They were like, what holds you back too with like different terrain? So the
Mm.
climbing foot that I'm speaking about with the Evolve and TRS is a rounded front end, and it won't fit into certain terrain. And so they and I worked together on this foot that the designer had modeled it off of the mountain goats, the way they can climb up a cliff. With the way their foot moves, he designed a prosthetic foot that kind of did that, mimicked it. And so he and I worked on a design, figured out how it would work, kind of did this cool little, we actually made a really fun film with Arc'teryx about that foot. And we ended up couldn't take it further past where we got it to, but we ended up with a working model that and it was mostly my fault. I kept breaking it because it's just the forces that we exert on our feet are so high. And this thing just, it was doing its best, but I guess I'm hard on things, but it was pretty cool to be able to use with the combination of those 2 feet, you could pretty much climb any terrain. And it was really quite neat. And so both of those companies have just said, we want to support how we can. So Arc'teryx is also with certain the way clothing fits, zipper pulls, things like that, where they're just paying attention to if you don't have the use of your hands, how do you pull a zipper? If you don't have the use of your legs, how do you get pants on? So they listen, and then they actually put those things into use kind of on a bigger scale.
That's great to hear, because especially the latter brand, they're well known. And just to hear that the big ones, then hopefully the smaller brands will follow and to be more inclusive in the fashion. So yeah, that's great. And what exciting partnerships, kind of putting your knowledge and then you're becoming a scientist almost, or material science with the different things that you're trying to, and the mountain, who knew about the mountain goat? That's great. So how do folks find out about Adaptive Adventures, and how will they best learn about upcoming events like the one in Oahu?
So the best thing they can do is go to adaptiveadventures.org. And then on the website, there's lots of things they can kind of dabble in. There's videos there. There are events that will show the exact calendar of what's going on. And once they get into the events and the calendar, they can just click on each event that kind of interests them. And it's very easy to understand. It'll say climbing, biking, skiing. It'll say the sport. It'll say the city, the sport, and the date. And so it's very easy to figure out what it is. Once they find out what they like, they click on it, they can register online, and then that will send them all the information they need for that. And so we're all over, like we had said earlier, we're all over the lower 48 and Puerto Rico and Hawaii. So regionally, wherever they are, they can kind of focus on that area. But the website kind of has a pretty good wealth of everything. It also has contact information for people like me there, so they can reach me, they can reach the other program managers. They can talk to Chelsea Elder if they have questions about how a nonprofit works and how we interface with the disability world. So they can it's a pretty good warehouse of everything adaptive. So they can kind of go there and find what they need.
Perfect. And just to repeat, it's .org, not .com. Well, at the end of our interviews, we have a lightning round section with 3 questions. You ready?
I'm ready. I think so.
Okay. So the first one is, what has been your favorite climb with Adaptive Adventures this year?
Oh God, this year. So we did a really fun clinic in the Red River Gorge in Kentucky. And I had some young veterans there, which I love working with them because they're just so energetic and excited. And so we had 2 days of climbing with them, and it was just lovely. Just in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, beautiful sandstone cliffs all over the place, and just teaching different adaptive techniques and better ways to climb and better ways to interface with the natural world.
I'm gonna have to look that up on the map. Yeah, cool. And what important tip would you give to someone who's interested in starting an adaptive group of their own?
That's a really great question. If you're interested in starting your own group, depending on what that sport looks like, you want to just kind of find the person or persons who have the knowledge that you need. So if you're a climber, you want to find those groups that are, if you know climbing, great. But if you don't know adaptive climbing, then you're going to have to plug into somebody like us or somebody in that region that or somebody else knows, because you want to just be able to, you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. Most of this stuff has been figured out. And I always tell people, don't just bang your head against the wall, just ask for help. And once you ask for help, it's like a spigot, and you turn it on, it just runs. And so just take advantage of those people. People are willing to share their expertise. And I think the adaptive world is truly supportive. So just ask, look around, and then follow whatever that is that you're passionate about.
Awesome. And speaking of the community, this blog and podcast are all about shining a light on folks who are bringing diversity and belonging in outdoor recreation. So do you have a shout out for someone in your community who is doing great work, doing just that, bringing diversity and belonging into the outdoors?
Yeah, that's kind of a perfect timing question too. We partner a lot with Movement Gyms. Movement Gyms are a really well-run climbing gym organization. They used to be Earth Treks. They started actually in Boston, and then Movement, they have nationwide now. And we literally had a meeting with them yesterday about how we can make adaptive climbing more inclusive in the gyms. And so I would give them a shout out. They are just, I mean, not many companies will actually sit down and say, we're already doing this, but like, how can we do it better? And one of those people, and it literally just happened yesterday. So big shout out to our partnership with Movement Gyms.
I will check them out and I'll link to them. And that was my final question. It's been great chatting with you about all the great work that you have done and Adaptive Adventures has done. And yeah, I look forward to sharing this with the audience at large.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate it. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you.